Joining us now is criminal defense attorney and former Manhattan prosecutor Duane Saland. Welcome to you. So we've got this war of words between the governor and the president right now. In his lawsuit, Governor Newsom says that the president's decision to send in the National Guard was an unprecedented power grab. He says it violates the 10th Amendment of the Constitution. Does he have a case, and what does it state?
Yeah, so the 10th Amendment generally says that the federal government has certain powers and authorities, and that which is not designated to them theoretically goes to the state. And I'm putting this in the most simple terms. But policing states and policing counties and cities is not one of those sort of rights that the federal government has. So that's the premise of this. And I think it does hold water. Not to say that the federal government has not been involved in the past. We've seen it, during the civil rights era with LBJ back in the 1960s. But that's generally happens when there's a request to call up the National Guard by that sitting governor. Newsom didn't do that. That is a large part of their argument here. You've overstepped your boundaries. You've overstepped your authority, Mr. President.
So when it comes to the Insurrection Act, though, does the president have to consult with the state to use that and call in the Guard? And isn't the idea that they are protecting law enforcement, not engaging with the civilian population in a protest?
Well, with the Insurrection Act, really, first of all, this Insurrection Act of 1807 was not the premise of it, meaning the movement by the government. The government is looking towards something else, United States Code, as it relates to the armed services. But if there is a rebellion, theoretically, which this is not a rebellion, and I'm using that term very narrowly here, then the federal government could theoretically bring in the military to be that sort of police force. But it's not at the request. And the next question becomes, what's the purpose here? Is it just to protect the federal government, meaning to protect the ICE workers? Is that what it's for? Or is it for actually policing, which they should not be doing? Is it for arresting? Will they shoot people? This is a real concern and issue. So, this is a president who routinely will not necessarily ask for permission first. He won't either ask for forgiveness afterwards. He does what he wants to do, whether or not it's the rule of law. And the point here by Governor Newsom is, I'm going to challenge this in the courts, and I'm going to make sure that the court says what you're doing is all right and constitutional.
What about this idea, and whether it was taken out of context or whether the administration would really do it, but arresting the governor of California? On what grounds, if that were to happen?
Yeah, this seems like sophomore garbage to me from President Trump. Yes, an assemblyman, a state senator, United States senator, a governor, anyone can be arrested if you violate the law. That, no one is above the law, including Mr. President. So Donald Trump is really, though, taking this to the extreme. Are they going to arrest the governor? From a practical standpoint, certainly we haven't seen any grounds to do so, that there's probable cause to arrest him. But the sort of the mayhem that would set off might even dwarf the protests that you're seeing in the streets. And I would just add and say, there's a First Amendment right for people to protest. It's fair to say you can't start looting and damaging and destroying property. That's a crime. But this is not necessarily the method to do it. That's why you have state law enforcement and county and city law enforcement.
Right. If you carry out violent acts, if you are looting, that won't hold up in court in terms of First Amendment rights. But civil rights groups are preparing lawsuits alleging excessive force for unlawful detentions. How do you see that playing out legally for those who are there to protest the ICE actions?
It's case by case. The police and law enforcement have the right to protect property, to protect people, and you have a right to protest too. There's a balance. It's hard to say how each one will play out because each one will be unique to the facts set forth there. But I think the message needs to be, use that First Amendment right with your action and words, but be on notice that if you're going to burn cars or you're going to loot stores, there's a real risk, and rightfully so, within the four corners of the law, if you violate it.
Right. That is then breaking the law, and then you deal with that in court. Duane Saland, thank you. I know it's complex. I appreciate the breakdown.